Ernesto had always lived in the shadows of his own life. A quiet man in his early 40s, with hands calloused from decades of shaping wood, he rarely spoke about himself. Those who knew him in the small town of Monteverde only knew him as the humble carpenter who repaired furniture, crafted cabinets, and mended doors. Children adored him for his patience, and neighbors trusted him for his honesty, but in the grand scheme of the world, Ernesto was invisible. The day of the talent competition, Monteverde's annual showcase of local skills and performances, Ernesto didn't expect to be noticed. He wasn't there to compete. Really, he had merely accompanied his niece, Isabella, a vibrant teenager who loved to sing. As he walked into the crowded auditorium, he felt the familiar hum of anxiety and excitement mingling with the smell of polished wood and faint traces of spilled coffee. He lingered near the back, leaning against a wooden railing, observing the chaos. The stage shimmered under bright lights, contestants rehearsed hurriedly, and the judges, a panel of 3, scribbled notes while sipping lukewarm tea. Ernesto felt out of place, his presence almost forgotten amid the young performers dressed in sequins and satin. He adjusted the brim of his hat and sighed softly, watching Isabella skip toward the backstage area. But fate, it seemed, had a different plan. As the event organizer realized one of the contestants had failed to show, a murmur spread through the backstage area. A last-minute call was made for a volunteer to fill the empty slot. Ernesto, still quietly observing, heard Isabella whisper something. "Uncle Ernesto, you should do it. Just play for them." His heart skipped a beat. Play, but he hadn't performed in front of anyone in decades. The thought of stepping onto the stage, facing the expectant eyes of strangers, made him sweat. He shook his head, trying to decline, but Isabella persisted. "Please, uncle, just for a few minutes. You have a gift, and people need to hear it." Before he could protest further, someone grabbed his arm gently. "We need a performer. Can you do it?" the assistant asked. Ernesto looked around, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on him, and then something inside him gave way. Perhaps it was the innocence in Isabella's gaze, perhaps it was the years of unspoken longing to be heard. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, and followed them backstage. He stood behind the curtain, his knees slightly trembling. In his hands, he held a worn acoustic guitar, its body scarred with years of use, strings slightly tarnished, but to him, it was perfect. He tuned it carefully, each note resonating with a warmth that only years of practice could produce. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the memories of his father teaching him the basics of chords and scales wash over him. His father had been a musician before becoming a carpenter, and Ernesto had inherited both the hands that build and the heart that sings. The announcer's voice called his name, and the murmurs of the audience grew into polite applause. Ernesto walked on stage quietly, the spotlights blinding at first, but he barely noticed. He set the guitar against his chest, feeling its familiar weight, and sat down on the stool center stage. For a heartbeat, he said nothing. The auditorium seemed enormous, the crowd a sea of faces blurred by the glare of the lights. He closed his eyes again and took a deep breath. Then he began to play. His fingers moved over the strings with a precision that spoke of decades of devotion. The melody started softly, almost imperceptibly, like a whisper in the wind. It was a song he had written long ago, in the solitude of his workshop, when the world seemed to forget him. The notes were tender, melancholic, and beautiful, each one carrying a story of quiet struggles, dreams deferred, and love unspoken. The judges shifted in their seats, intrigued. They weren't used to seeing someone like Ernesto, a man who looked ordinary, deliver something extraordinary. His voice, when it joined the guitar, was rich and resonant, filled with an aching sincerity that made the words feel alive. The lyrics spoke of simple joys and deep regrets, of small victories and the passage of time, but the raw emotion was universal. It was as if every person in the room could feel their own memories mirrored in his song. Ernesto's eyes were closed, but he was aware of the silence that had fallen over the audience. No coughing, no shuffling, no whispers, just an intense, shared stillness. People were holding their breath, caught in the web of his music. His voice wavered at certain moments, not out of weakness, but from the depth of feeling he poured into each phrase. Cheers began to form in the eyes of those listening, unnoticed by Ernesto, who was lost in the music. One judge, a stern woman known for her critical reviews, felt the lump in her throat grow with each note. She quickly dabbed at her eyes, but it was futile, the emotion was undeniable. Another judge, a former musician, sat with his hand over his mouth, overwhelmed by the purity of Ernesto's performance. Even the youngest judge, usually impatient and indifferent, leaned forward, completely captivated. Ernesto transitioned into the chorus, his voice swelling with intensity, yet maintaining a gentle vulnerability. The melody was both familiar and unique, a rare combination that tugged at the hearts of everyone present. He remembered his mother's smile, the smell of fresh wood shavings in his father's workshop, and the countless nights he had spent alone, strumming in the dim glow of a lantern. All of it came together in this one moment, a lifetime condensed into a few minutes of music. As the final chord resonated and the last note faded into silence, Ernesto opened his eyes. For a moment, he saw the audience frozen, as if stunned by the beauty they had just witnessed. Then came the applause. It started softly, hesitant, as if people were afraid to break the spell, and quickly grew into a thunderous ovation. Some audience members were crying openly, moved by the unexpected power of the performance. The judges were on their feet, their faces glistening with tears. The stern woman, who rarely showed emotion, wiped her cheeks and whispered, "Incredible, absolutely incredible." The musician judge nodded, almost speechless, while the youngest judge exclaimed, "That was, wow. That was real magic." Ernesto stood, humbled by the overwhelming reaction. He tried to speak, to offer some modest acknowledgement, but his throat felt tight. He managed a quiet, "Thank you," and allowed himself a small, almost shy smile. The audience cheered louder, some clapping in rhythm to the fading vibrations of the guitar. Backstage, Isabella hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I told you, uncle. I knew everyone needed to hear you." Ernesto chuckled softly, a rare sound, and hugged her back. "I didn't think I had it in me," he admitted. "But I guess I did." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Reporters asked for interviews, neighbors congratulated him, and social media buzzed with videos of his performance. But Ernesto remained grounded. He returned to his workshop, surrounded by the familiar smell of sawdust and varnish, reflecting on the experience. He realized that his music had always been a part of him, waiting patiently for the right moment to emerge. The applause and accolades were gratifying, yes, but what mattered most was the connection he had forged, however brief, with so many hearts. In the following weeks, Ernesto received invitations to perform elsewhere, but he chose to remain in Monteverde. He continued to work in his shop, crafting furniture with the same care and precision as before, yet now there was a new lightness in his step. The town began to recognize him not just as a carpenter, but as an artist, a man whose quiet life harbored a voice capable of moving souls. He never sought fame or fortune. He had discovered something far more valuable. The realization that even the quietest lives can carry extraordinary depth, and that sometimes, the world needs only a moment of courage to reveal it. Ernesto's story became a legend in Monteverde, inspiring countless others to embrace their hidden talents, to speak, to sing, to create. And whenever he played his guitar, he no longer felt invisible. The notes he strummed were no longer just his, they were shared, a bridge between his heart and the hearts of those who listened, an eternal reminder that beauty often resides in the most unexpected places.